I thought it was recording. Okay, so I added this gem, the bias token auth, with the specific, I'm telling it like a specific version to add. Saying, hey, actually go to the GitHub and add the version that's, you know, greater or equal to 1.2.0. And then I ran bundle, and it did work somewhere, right? Where did I do it? Right here, bundle, and it worked. But looking, so I then went to like, so this is the rubygems.org. So this is where all those gems live. Like, look how many gems there are. Are you kidding me? 95 billion. There's, I don't know that. Although, that's download. Oh my god, that's download. Still, that's crazy. There's like a ton of gems. Like, yeah, there's a lot. Anyway, so we could search, you know, devise token auth here. Find this gem. So I'm looking at the 1.2.0 version. Now, this is telling me, you know, it's telling me what this, like this, all these like these libraries depend on other things. So, and this is where you can get into like, you know, upgrading stuff, you break stuff. So we are doing 1.2.0. That's like the latest version they have. That's the one we just downloaded. But if I look at this, this is saying, hey, this is only going to work for Rails greater than, so we have to be greater than 4.2.0 or less than 6.2. So we're using 7. So we're gonna kind of, maybe we can try it. We might be taking a little bit of a risk though. So, and I say, let's just try it, see if it works. I don't know, that's maybe a little risky. The other option, so with that, the other thing we could do is, you know, and this can sometimes happen, is like you want to use this gem. Well, we can't, you know, we can't use Rails 7 and this gem. Like if this were like a real production app, I would be like, okay, we can't use Rails 7 because they're saying right here, you know, they're only working from 4.2.0 up to 6.2. So maybe, so we can be rolling the dice a little, which might be fine for like, you know, any like our apps. But yeah, if it was production, I would probably be a little scared. I definitely wouldn't do it if like this was like a real app. I'd either go find another gem or use a different version of Rails. And so this can kind of be like the thing, like companies are not going to, like when Rails 7 came out a couple months ago, like you're probably, unless you're starting from scratch, you're definitely not going to like upgrade Rails from 6 to 7 because it's probably going to break a whole bunch of stuff. Even if you're starting from scratch, you might even say something to yourself like, I don't want to use Rails 7. I want to use Rails like 6 dot something, just so, you know, maybe there's going to be some libraries that aren't quite updated to the new version. So it's kind of like a good little side note into here. But I threw out an article in Slack. I kind of just want to try anyway and see if it works with 7. But what we could do is we could just install, or we could just create a new Rails project with a different version of Rails. So if you run this command, and this is out in Slack, this article. I was doing some tests here. So I can list, I do this gem list Rails local. This is going to tell me what versions of Rails I have. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 versions of Rails. What version? I'm just curious, what version of Rails do you only have 7, or do you have 6 versions as well? By 6, I mean it starts with a 6.
I have one of them that starts with a
I have 2 7 versions and 1 6.
What's your 6th version?
6.1.4.7.
Is that the same for all of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I only have 7.0.2.3.
That's what I have too. 7.0.
Okay. Yeah, so you could
The command not found. I might have did it wrong. Oh, I did it wrong.
I'm kind of just, still tempted just to go see how, I don't know. I probably shouldn't. We should probably just start over.
Are you able to have more than one version at a time?
What?
You're able to have more than one version at a time?
Yeah, you can, well, you can have, so your Rails project, like if you have a Rails project, it's only going to have one version.
Right.
Like we're going to, like if we start over, we're going to have to create a new Rails project.
Because I can see like all the way back to my tilde and check the Rails version, and it's 7.0.2.3.
Yeah, but if you do the gem, or what command did I, gem list Rails local, that would, these are like the Rails versions I have installed in my computer.
Okay.
So you can install a specific version with this command.
So I guess I have 3 versions as well then.
Yeah, you don't do like if I do a Rails -v,
Yeah.
that's like my default one. But if I do the gem list Rails local, that's just kind of telling me all of those things I have installed.
So 6147 is the lowest I have.
Yeah, I would assume, I'd be surprised if some of you don't have a 6 version. But you could run this command. And that would install, that should install it. I mean, I already had it, but. Cool. So let's maybe just be a little, well, I mean, I think we can just try it out, but I will just show this, and so this will be on the video. So I could go, because maybe you go work at a company, and this would definitely be the case where they're like using a specific version of Rails. So you'd want to use the version they're using. So you could go in and download it, and then you would just, well, really you just like clone it and you would have it. But if you did ever want to create a specific, like a project with a specific version, this is how you do this. So you would make sure you have it installed on your computer, and then you would do a Rails and then a underscore, and then you give it the version you would want to use, like 6.1.4.7 underscore. And then you do your new, we could call this like cat tinder, version 6, spring 22 -d postgres ql -API. Where did that go? Hit enter to load. So it's the same command. You just before the new, you use underscores and then you put in the version that you want. And you might notice that one takes a little longer because it might have to go like get different libraries that you don't have installed. Maybe. So then I could CD into that version, CD. Let's just do an LS, CD into Tinder V6. Open that up in code. I just kind of want to show you this. When I open that one up, I go to my gem file. Now it's using, now I can see that I'm using, you know, the 6.14. And yeah, this is gonna change a lot of like, because this Rails version is gonna depend on a lot of different versions. So you can kind of like scroll through this gem lock and maybe see some of these dependencies. But I don't know. I'm still gonna stick with the 7 version. Let's just see if it works. If not, we have a fallback. But this was a good little like real like you know, once you get into like more complicated projects, you know, you can't just always use the latest and greatest because there's all these dependencies, like, you know, libraries depend on other libraries. Like I go look at like the bcrypt library. That depends on like these libraries. I look at that library, you know, that like depends on like this stuff. This depends on all of this. Cool. Questions on this? So I'm going to take away this version 6.1, but we might need to come back to it. We'll see if we have any issues pop up. Which could be fun ones to debug. This might be something you might want to think about in your starter project. So when you're doing your starter project, do you want to use Rails 7 or do you want to use Rails 6? I would probably recommend, like, we're not using any of the features of Rails 7, so you'd be fine using 6. It'd be the safer bet. Okay. Let's see here. So I'm going to CD back. That was a good little tangent. And make sure I close one. Okay. So sweet. Let's keep going with this setup and maybe like, because we're actually getting right into Auth right away in the back end. So I think we'll find out pretty soon if we have any issues. But let's give it a go. So in my README section, I might have like a specific, like, because now we're doing like more device token auth setup. Remember, this is more just like the back end. So like this might be something I might want to note in my README. you know, this in our gem file, you know, might use, you know, version less than 6.2 of Rails. Okay, so let's see if it's working though. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a model. Let's do this one. Actually, let's do this one. One, add gem file. Then two, we're gonna create a model. I'm going to call this a devise model. We do this is with this command, and I'll throw this in Slack. So this is creating a user model. It's going to be called a user model. And some routes for us. I'm going to call this a devise user model. It's like a special model. So let's go ahead and run this command and see what this creates for. So I'll do Rails G devise token auth install user API. Auth. So notice this creates, this devise token auth RB file. It creates, it inserts something into our application controller. It adds something into our routes. It creates a migration file and it creates a user file in our models. So let's kind of look, oh man, I should have done a commit before I ran that. So we could have seen this easy. So let's just go through and look at like these files. So if I look at my user.rb, here's my user model. I want to actually add one thing inside of here. Throw that out in Slack. So we're also going to have this extend devise models. But we can see we're getting, some of these things like the database authenticable. We can like authenticate someone when they log in. We can register someone, recover someone, remember someone, and validate someone. Okay. Something else that was created was this, let's look at our application controller. So we go to control. This wasn't created, but something was added. So it's adding, this include device token auth. So this is going to set up some of our controller stuff. Another thing that was added or was changed was our routes.rb. So we have this mount device token auth per user. This actually, if I do a Rails S, this is going to create some routes for us. If I go localhost 3000 rel info routes, I have them. So notice I have a migration pending. Let's go look at that before we run it. Here's my migration. So I have a user. So I'm just creating a user table and it has these fields as provider, UID, encrypted password, has all of these things on here. There's actually stuff we want to add here before we do this. So we're going to do this as a migration. So I'll slack this out as well. And I'll throw this in the README. So we create a model. So there was add extends in model. Just throw these. I mean, these are also in the Neo notes, but just so we can kind of show what we're doing. You know, we wanted to add this in our user. So the next thing we want to do is we want to, we're going to add a migration or add columns to our table, to our migration, to our user via a migration. So how we do this is we're going to do we run this command. All this does is this just creates a migration file called add trackable to users. Go ahead, stop my server, run this. So it's just creating a file that's a migration that's timestamped add trackable to users. There's that migration file. So what we're going to do is we're going to add, this to this table. So I'll just slack this out. Take that, just throw that in there. So to this users table, we're just adding a couple extra fields. We're adding a sign-in count, current sign-in at, last sign-in at, current sign-in IP, last sign-in IP. Those are not in our user table by default. I could have thrown these in this migration file, but I think this is kind of nice. It kind of like separates. Here's what we got by default, and here's something we're adding manually. Throw that in the README.
How did you get that second migration file?
I ran this command, Rails G migration, and that's out in Slack. Rails G migration add trackable to users. That creates the migration file. It's like the timestamp. .rb. And then after this, we can, migrate our database. So that runs our two migration files. So that creates our user table, and then it goes and runs that other migration, which is just adding extra columns to our user table. So if I look at my schema, like this is my user table, it has all of these columns, and then it has all these extra ones that we added in that last migration. Cool. Yeah, and now that we got them, like the database stuff, now I can go kind of show you what the routes is doing. So I can do the Rails S port 3001. And we can refresh. So we have all of these routes defined: API auth, sign in, sign out, with like a get, post. So these are the ways we're going to be able to like sign our user in, sign them out. You know, there's things like we can do registrations. So like update a registration, edit a new registration. So this is like the path we're going to use to sign someone up, etc. And also like these controller methods are actually like, they're done. Like we don't need to do anything with the app, like with the controller, like that's going to be done for us. So the back end is relatively straightforward. We just have to like, because this stuff is all like essentially done. Sound good? That's pretty cool, right? So that is like the setup for the back end. And this user model, this is going to be like, so I now have one model in my database. So you can now think about the user as being the, like the person that's going to be logged in. So when someone like registers for my website, I'm actually going to like be adding them to my website. Like in the database, that first time they register. And we'll see that in a second once we get our front end kind of set up. Okay, so now we got to go into our front end setup. Cool. So this can be, this first part is probably just going to be a little bit of a review. So I have a Rails project, and now I want to add my React project. So what I do is I'm going to, you know, in my Rails project, you know, create a React app. So you might ask yourself, like, why do I do this in my Rails app? They are two separate apps. Any reasons? Right, this is the things, like, since we're reviewing, I kind of want to do a little deeper dive in here. Like I'm going to do like a yarn create React app client. In here. Why do I call it client? Any ideas?
Because that's what's receiving all the database information, right? So I mean,
So, but
like
yeah,
everything
why?
in your front end is in the client.
Yeah, this is my front end, right? Do I need to call it client?
I mean,
Is-
no,
No, I don't have to. I could call it client is just a word. It's just a word that, is used as the front end off. Like, we'll use the word client like a client does an API call. Like client can just sometimes be an alias for the front end. I could call it front end. I could call it React app. We're just calling it client. What about this? Why do I have these together? Or why do I have this in my Rails app instead of like somewhere else? Well, I could say it's a way to keep it organized. Organized. It's also like, if I can spell organized, whatever. Also, I can share a GitHub repo. This is going to prevent the need for having a client repo and a backend repo. So this way I can share them. And they do, like, in a sense, they are combined. Like I am going to be using them together. I'm using them as one. So that's why I'm putting them together. It's like an organization thing. I can share the GitHub repo. Like, as far as I'm concerned, this is one app that's separated into a Rails app and a client app. And then same thing here. Like, so once we create that app, you can CD into client. Next step might be, add third-party packages. Which ones are we going to use? We're going to use like some common ones that we probably just want by default. React Router. React Router DOM, I should say. Let's do Axios. Maybe like if you want React Bootstrap. Any others that we've used? Maybe use for like Axios hooks. That one, I mean, we can always add stuff later. So maybe these three for now, or just even these two could be good. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll say this can always add later as needed. I'm not like stuck to these. I'm just curious if I do a yarn add. Speaking about versions, I'm just curious if I do a React Router DOM, which one it's going to add by default. I'm wondering if it's going to add 5 or 6. So if I want to see what version of React Router DOM was added, I would go to my package JSON. So yeah, it looks like it's adding version 6. Okay, which is like the newer version. Cool. So, and then yarn add Axios. And if we're doing Bootstrap, I kind of forgot Bootstrap. I'm going to need to like look at the documentation. Bootstrap. I think there's like 2 we need to add for this one. Yeah, React Bootstrap and Bootstrap 5.13. So go ahead and throw that out in Slack as well. So you kind of say how like our package JSON is like the gem file. I could manually come in here and add these names and then run yarn, or I can just, I think it's better like to do the yarn add and then the package name with JavaScript. But this is telling us, you know, what packages we have installed. Okay. So there's that. And like, if you wanted to go and like inspect those more, you could go to NPM, Node Package Manager. That's where all these live, like React Bootstrap. When we do like a yarn add React Bootstrap, we're pulling it from NPM. So if you want some more information about like, you know, where this project's living, what it might depend on, 3,000 dependents. JavaScript's crazy when it's like what it depends on. So. All right. What else do you think, just kind of maybe from memory, so we're going on with our client, what's that one thing we kind of need to do when setting up like Rails and React? This is one I always forget. I mean, you can just list whatever, but there's one specific thing we need to do to kind of like connect our Rails and our client. And it's
Adding the local host.
yeah, it's that adding the proxy.
Yeah.
Let's just do that before we forget. Say something like this, like add proxy. Now this README is not meant to be for you. I'm kind of just demoing, like this is as you're going through your starter project, you know, document this as needed. So I'm going to add this proxy to my package.json. And I can just throw this anywhere at like the root level. Okay, so back to my README. I think something I can maybe do next is maybe like, you know, coming up with like a folder structure, you know, starting to create some components. So there's not like a conventional, I mean, there's different strategies, different ideas on how to do folder structure in React. There's not like a standard way like there is in Rails. So let's look at how like we're going to do this a little differently, just to maybe show another way we could kind of create a different folder structure. So for how we're going to do this one, we're going to make these folders. I also want to like throw in like I think something, you know, I'm going to want a place for maybe like hooks. And yeah, I think that sounds good. So we're going to have a components folder, but then in here we can maybe have like an, you know, an auth. Then we could have like shared components, you know, we might eventually like add some more inside of here, like maybe eventually we'd have like cats components or something. But for now, this is what we're going to create. So let's just, I'm going to just do this here. You can do this in your terminal. So I want to make verb. Let's just think about this. This is going to be a little bit of a terminal review. If I do a make dir source / components, is that going to work right here? What is this? I mean, I guess my question is what are these commands kind of assuming? Like, let's just run this command.
You'd have to source it from the bit like from the beginning of your computer file system. Like do the / like desktop, and would you have to slash it all the way from there?
I mean, that's one way I could do it. That's kind of a pain though.
Don't you need a source directory first?
What this is, so yeah, there's two options. The one Catherine was saying is I could give it the absolute path. So I could say like, let's see if I can even do this. ~. I don't even know what it is.
User.
No, that is it should be desktop from here. And then DPL demo. And then yes, 6. And what is the name of this? Cat Tinder Spring 22. Yeah, this is like the relative path. I don't want to do that. That takes too long, but I could do it. What I wanted, that's the absolute path. What I want to do is I want to give it the relative path. So where am I right now? If I print working directory, like I'm already right here. So I don't need to type that out. Like that's where I am. But what this is assuming is that inside of this cat Tinder directory, there's this source directory inside of this cat Tinder directory. But there's really not, because where does this source live?
In the client?
Yeah, it lives in the client. So I could either append this with client. And then that would work. Or I could, CD into the client. Like these commands are like assuming you're in the client directory. So maybe that's a note you make in clienter. So when we're working, especially when we have like this Rails and React project, and we have like, we're throwing out these commands, you might want to make a note of which directory should I be in, right? When I do a yarn add Axios, I want that to be, in the client directory. Cool. So yeah, so now I can just come through and do all these. So we're going to make a directory source components. We're going to make a directory providers. We're going to make a direct. I mean, you could also just do this in VS Code, come into your client source. Do this manually, but let's just do this with a terminal. I'm going to do a components. I can use tab to autocomplete that. That one's already done. And then I'm going to do auth. And I'm going to do shared. And yeah, so now in my source, this is how I'm doing my structure. I'm going to have these components. And then inside of here, like this is maybe a way I could like organize my components in like specific folders in here. Like I can have an auth folder for all my auth components. I can have a shared folder for like all the components I might share across multiple stuff. You can maybe do a pages. It's kind of up to you. So you'll definitely, when it comes to folder structure, you'll definitely see like all sorts of varieties and methods and people saying why theirs is the best. Cool. So there is that. All right, just trying to think. Let's do a commit. We've done a lot of stuff. Let's just kind of review what we did. I mean, we've updated our README, we've added, we created our React app, so let's just go ahead and do it. Add, git, add. I also don't know, like, you choose how to do this. It's like no set way. All right. Let's see. I'm gonna skip ahead. Oh wait. I'm gonna skip ahead in our in the notes, and let's just do really quickly. Let's do some React router stuff. Don't want to get to the authentication stuff quite yet. So let's do React router. Basic setup. So I'll just kind of like list some of these steps out. Like we want to like, you know, add routes to our index.js. Maybe like create a nav bar. Go and do like in index.js. And this can be like in the index.js or app.js. It kind of depends how you set it up. And then in index.js, you know, wrap browser router, stuff like that. Okay, so let's go ahead. Actually, I feel like I have the wrong. Let me see something. Is anyone following along on Neo? I just want to use, I think there's one that, there's like 3 or 4 different versions of this lecture. I just want to make sure I'm using the right one. This is Bootstrap. Or none of the above. All right, anyway, let's just go ahead and set up some components and get React router set up. So what I'm going to do is in my auth folder, let's just go ahead and create a couple components. So let's do like we're eventually going to want like a login.js. Let's do a const login. And then in our auth, we're also going to want like a register component. Let's export these default, export default login. And we'll do one for register. Okay, let's maybe do, I don't know, in here, let's do in our shared, let's maybe do like a home.js. All right, just creating a couple different components. And then let's do in here like a no match. So we'll have like just a nice little, if we accidentally have a bad React router link, we'll have a component handle that. I'm just going to select this out. I'm going to throw in here. So this is going to be at the bottom of our of our routes in React Router, just in case if someone gives us a bad React router URL, we can just tell them, hey, not found, and we can give them a way to get home. Cool. And then also I'm going to do a nav bar inside of here. I'm just going to copy this for now. Just keeping these simple. Actually, yeah, let's just do this simple for now. Okay. So I'm gonna have like these page, like I'm gonna have a login page, I'm gonna have a register page, I'm gonna have a home page, and like a navbar component and a no match component. But this gives me some stuff to kind of get just the basic of React routers set up. So let's go to my index.js and let's go ahead and get these set up. So I'm going to use my browser router component. Now this is going to be like a little different than the way we did it in the past. Now because there's really like, even if you look at like the React router documentation, when they're like telling you to set up, your routes, they say like, oh, either set this up in your index or an app or, some other file. So that they don't even really give you like a set way. But the concept is going to be the same. So what we want to do is we're going to wrap our app with this browser router component. And this time around in our app.js, this is where we're going to define, our routes. So I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to just get rid of this div. So I'm actually going to throw my nav bar right here. And then let's go ahead and throw in our routes. So I need my routes, and then I need my route component from React Router. Let's do path equals slash element equals home. So import my home component. Notice this is like last time we used that, like we did like in our app, we had our nav bar and then we had like this outlet component. I'm not exactly doing that this time, but it'll work the same. So we'll have our login component. We will have a register component or a register route. That takes us to our register component. And then we're going to have one that matches, anything. And that's going to go to our no match. So if someone doesn't give us a slash or a slash login or slash register, then we'll go to this no match component. All right, a lot of changes made here, so let's go test it out. So there's going to be my nav bar and there's my home component. So I should be able to go to login. There's my login component. I should go to register. There's my register component. And then, yeah, if I give it like a bad one, that's page not found, return home. But notice my nav bar is on all of the pages. So let's do a little, let's get our nav bar up and running. Since we have that set up, so let's grab our nav bar. And then from here, we'll add some links. So let's just do this. Let's do a link. So this could go to / that can be home. Login. And we're gonna have to do some stuff with this later, but just get it working. So home, login, and register. Okay. Questions here? I'm also going to note here, kind of like the folder structure. You almost choose how to do this. There's different ways to do the React router setup. I mean, there's no one set way. There's a couple.
So when we create our starter projects, we're doing it with authentication, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, if you were like to go compare like what we're like this React app we're doing today, like, and you go compare it to like the others, like that one client I created, it's going to look a little different.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that can be something you can kind of do, is like go back and forth and maybe see which one you like, which one you don't. Let's say the way we're kind of doing this one, it's like more of a, even though we're using React Router 6, it's kind of more of like a React Router 5 way, but it still works. Let's see, what time is it? Let's take a break. I do want to at least get like a register working so we can test, you know, combine our front end and our back end. But I think this is a good spot to take a break. Let's come back at 12 o'clock. I'm going to create a repo for this and push this up. But does anyone need any of the code?
I'll just wait for you